Our buildings and communities are designed and constructed and operated in a way that has a significant impact on human health and the quality of life. We spend about 90% of our time inside, where air quality can be 5 times worse than outside air quality. There's just so many elements of the built environment that impact human health and the ability of humanity to thrive. In general, buildings use about 40% of the energy, globally. So it's a huge slice of the overall greenhouse gas emissions that are being produced into the atmosphere. And then if you look at the urban environment specifically, buildings account for 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions within the urban built environment. So you're looking at industry, transportation, and buildings, and energy that's used in buildings, and that's a huge part. Energy use is tied to emissions. If we can reduce energy use, the byproduct of reducing energy use is also reducing carbon emissions. The reason why we focus on reducing water is because there's a lot of energy required to process water and deliver it to its end use. Emissions in general, of course, is the overarching goal of the program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, because those are the elements that are contributing to global warming.
So let's take energy. Sustainability helps reduce things like energy burden. Energy burden is basically the usage of energy that can fall on specific socioeconomic groups. Because a lot of affordable housing is not necessarily very energy efficient, they have a really large energy burden because their building is running its systems all the time. It's costing a ton of money. And a lot of the time, the people that are living in the building can't pay for it. If you're switching to something like, say you're going from an incandescent light bulb to an LED light bulb, the LED light bulbs are multiple times more efficient. And so whenever you're installing those in your building, you're using less electricity. And because you're using less electricity, that means your cost of running the building is less. So in affordable housing, if the landlords were to change out all of the systems for those that are more efficient, it would reduce the energy cost for the tenants and therefore help them.
Within sustainability as a whole, we like to talk about emissions and energy, but water is also really important because, a lot of areas don't have abundant water resources like we do in Pittsburgh. The more that we can do to reduce water use within buildings, the more that we have for everyone to use as a whole. For cities that have combined sewer systems, they really want to work hard at not only reducing the amount of wastewater they have to deal with, but also reducing the amount of stormwater they have to deal with. And so that's where not only these sustainability measures come in with reducing water use in a building, but also the green infrastructure can play a part. It can really also bring in a whole nother aspect into the city. Heat islands and green space and stormwater infrastructure, green infrastructure can really kind of check all those boxes. So it's not just like a one-trick pony, like it can do a lot for the city and for the people who live there. These sustainability measures and reducing water use are incredibly important.
Emissions connect to buildings in multiple different ways. There are 2 main forms of where emissions exist. One is called embodied carbon, which basically is all of the carbon used in order to make the materials of your building. And then the other one is called operational carbon, which accounts for all of the energy use that you use during the life of your building and all of the water that you use during the life of your building and the emissions that those create. That being said, carbon emission reduction and energy emissions reductions as it relates to buildings also go hand in hand. By virtue of you reducing your amount of energy, you're also reducing the amount of carbon. Curbing building emissions does a lot in many different forms. Obviously, on a global level, it's working towards making sure that we don't hit the 1.5 degrees Celsius global temperature increase. As it relates more on a local level, carbon emissions cause higher rates of asthma, of lung disease, of heart disease, because of all the particulates that are emitted into the atmosphere and then we breathe in. There's a factor that we like to use called the social cost of carbon. And what this is It assigns kind of a dollar value of the negative health impacts that carbon emissions has. And it's basically about $50 per ton of carbon emitted. Whenever they are reducing carbon, it's having this positive impact for the community.
In the end, the amount of time we spend indoors is currently being reflected by our building's energy and water use and subsequent emissions. In order to achieve a sustainable urban built environment, we must utilize design, whether in old buildings or new, to reach that goal.